Alright, so I'm going to do a few more, like a little more Patreon requests today. Starting off with Alexander Anayas, who asked me to do another, because he has done this before, of like another Star versus Warhammer fantasy storyline. As always, if you guys would like to have a Patreon request done, just hit the link below, head on over to my Patreon, where you guys can hit the third tier. That'll allow you access to do so, as well as check out all the other stuff on Patreon as well. But other than that, let's get started with the video. So this Star Versus is another Warhammer fantasy one, but it's a little different because it's not really focusing on Star. I know the title is a little deceptive, but hey, I couldn't think of anything else. But yeah, it's actually focusing on another member of the Butterfly family lineage. Kind of. I know it's not. They're not really related. Shut up. Just follow me on this. This is actually going to focus on Queen Solaria. So, yeah. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So let's get started. So the story actually begins in Season 4 of... somewhere nebulously in Season 4 of Star Versus. And in here, essentially what it is that Star and Marco are just kind of like looking through Mewman records, old Mewman records they've discovered in the castle, and are just kind of like going through it and are just kind of like, huh, this there's a lot of blacked out stuff because they're trying to help like Eclipsa catch up on her history, but there's a lot of like blacked out stuff. But one historical record that isn't really filled in a lot is the what is called the Green War, the War of the Green War, and they're like, what's the Green War? Like, what was that? And they're like, maybe Eclipsa knows. This wasn't her time. This does say this was during the reign of Solaria, so maybe she knows something of the Green War. So they go talk to Eclipsa, and Eclipsa's like, oh, you want to know about the Green War? And they're like, yeah, what was the Green War? And she's like, well, you have to understand, it wasn't really called the Green War, first off. You know, this, like, the Green War was really the Greenskin War. And they're like, Greenskins? Did you guys fight monsters? Was it another monster war your mom was launching in a campaign? And she's like, sit down, guys, this is a long story. So Eclipsa begins the story, and basically starts with, to begin with, my mother, as you know, Queen Solaria was really anti-monster. But what they don't really tell you in the history books is that my mom was also super expansionist. She wanted to create a new Mewman empire. She wanted to create, like, this just massive new kingdom for her people. And in order to do that, she didn't just want to conquer Muni. She wanted to conquer other worlds. And she believed she was ordained by... Like, she believed it was a great idea. Now, at the time... Like, Eclipse explains that, like, at the time, I was... I was young. I was, like, Star's age. I was almost Star's age at the time. And I... really didn't like the seeing how the monsters were, because I was already, stupping it with Globgor. But as I watched my mother try to create a new Mewman empire, there was one world they went to start out this new campaign. They found this one world where they thought, they had sent scouts before, and they saw it as a world already kind of wrapped up in conflict. But also, Solaria believed that it was so wrapped up in conflict that they could just march in and take it. So she sent Solaria sent a expeditionary force of, like, an expeditionary force of at least 200 men and a very capable general to lead this expedition force, and just kind of like build a base camp, set up like a foothold, and then, start sending in more men as they like get a little territory and a base camp going. That was the idea. However, what happened was that no less than 3 days later, they came back, or should I say what was left of them came back. And what came back was it was only five very scared men, and they were the lucky ones. The rest of them, and they're like, well, where's the general? And they pull out this severed head. And Solaria's like, who did this? Like, what did you run into that could have done such a horrendous thing to one of our most esteemed generals? And in response, one of the soldiers just starts laughing hysterically in tears, because he's like, it was him. It was him. He killed all of them. He and his army killed all of them. And they're like, who? And they're like, orcs. It was orcs. And they're like, and Solaria's like, orcs? The hell's an orc? So Solaria goes to talk to Glossaric, and she's like, my men encountered some weird men and, some weird soldiers. What are orcs? And he goes, oh, orcs. Like, I've traveled a lot of worlds. He's talking to both Glossaric and the Magical High Commission. She's talking to both of them. The Magical High Commission are like, okay, so what orcs are we talking? Are we talking, like, the White Hand of Saruman? Are we talking pig-nose monsters? What kind of orcs are we talking about? And she's giving the description the soldiers gave of, like, these huge, massive, just hulking monsters. And they screamed out as they charged the camp, Waaagh! And immediately the Magical High Commission and even Glossaric go silent, and they're like, what did you say? They're like that it's just that terrified moment where they're just like, what word did they say? Yeah, it was some word, Waaagh. It sounds more like it's a weird battle cry, and they're like, you didn't go tell me those weren't the orcs those men picked a fight with. Please tell me it wasn't those orcs. And did they have a leader? And she goes, yeah, it was some big orc named Grimgor. And they're like, tell me they didn't leave anything behind. And they're like, what's going on? They're just dumb monsters. Like, we fought monsters before. And you're like, no. You fought rookies and, not a non-standing army. That thing in that world is a monster. Because they're like, we've heard stories about this, about the orcs, and especially about one orc in particular named Grimgor Ironhide. Please tell me you didn't leave any dimensional scissors behind. And they're like, and the soldier's like, we don't know. We lost too many men during the scuffle. It's hard to tell. But we couldn't, the general scissors were never recovered. Maybe they just don't know how to use it. So they're like, okay, Solaria, I know you're big on this whole, Mewman Empire and all that. Don't go back. Don't go there again, because we are a big fish in a little pond. In that world, you got a taste of the ocean full of sharks with laser beams. Don't go back there. So Solaria's like, whatever. I'll take the advisement of the Magical High Commission. And yeah, I'll just, I won't go there. Fine, I'll take my empire somewhere else. However, a week later, reports start coming in that there's something that's been attacking outside villages, and at first they think it's monster attacks, until they start, seeing the damage of these villages and little settlements, and what few survivors there are. Talk about, this wave of green and this giant green monster wielding this huge battle axe left and right, just absolutely demolishing everything. And they're like, the orcs figured out the dimensional scissors, and now Grimgor and his Waaagh are now here. Not just them, goblins. In fact, Solaria gathers her Mewman army and leads into battle. The first things they encounter were goblins, and they fight these goblins who are riding the giant spiders, as you know. Solaria slays and her soldiers slay all of them, except for a few, and basically tells, because Solaria doesn't get it yet. She doesn't get that out of everyone you could have fucked with, Grimgor was probably in the top 5 worst. So she basically tells one of the goblins, run back to to Grimgor with a message. And the 3 little goblins she left alive are immediately like, yeah, okay, and they run off. And Eclipsa, who hears about this, is like, Mom, maybe you shouldn't have attacked these guys. These guys are killing our people indiscriminately. they, and the Magical High Commission seem like don't poke, this Grimgor guy. And she's like, it's just another monster. He'll be fine. He'll be cleaved under my sword. So the goblins go back to the orc camp, and Grimgor's there, and he's just kind of like sitting there, just waiting for another fight. And the goblins approach him, and they're like, "Sir, Boss Grimgor, we have a message from the queen of this new land." And he's like, "What's the message?" And they go, you aren't tough enough." Oh no! The worst thing you could say to an orc is, "You're a bitch." So Grimgor just fucking kills all three of them. He's like, "They says we's not orky enough. They says I ain't proper orky. They says I ain't killy. Well, you know what I says to that, boys. Waaagh!" And everyone just screams "Waaagh!" And the war chant is so loud they can hear it all the way in the castle. And in that moment, in that very moment where they're hearing the war cries of the Black Orc and his army, Solaria finally gets it. She immediately gets, I have made a big tactical error. And sure enough, the orcs show why they's proper's killy. So Grimgor, now thoroughly insulted and looking for a fight, he's like, "Yous wants a fight, you knife ears? I'll give yous a proper fight." So Grimgor and his army of orcs just start ransacking the countryside, and Solaria and her army go to face them. And the Mewman army is used to like bullying the monsters. As we saw in Mewman history, the monster army was more of a rebellion and more of like defending themselves. They didn't really have like a standing army per se. What they unfortunately, the Mewman army has never really encountered is a army that is more than willing to fight back and pretty good at it. So when they clash with the orcs, in that moment, when Solaria sees Grimgor and the orcs, some of her soldiers are like, they run. Like, they just fucking drop their weapons and run when they see the greenskins, coming down the mountainside, just roaring and fucking waving weapons in the air, and Grimgor's leading them. So Solaria and the Mewmans the greenskin war is now full in effect. And Mewmans were not built to fight orcs in no way, shape, or form. Orcs outmatch the Mewmans by a country mile, because Mewmans never, they just bullied the monsters. Solaria was all high on the whole thing of, we're the best empire, we clearly can conquer our own world, so we can conquer others. Why, oh no, I just saw that orc bite that guy's head off, I'm a little scared. So Solaria clearly, that's, as she's trying to fight against them, and the wand is giving her some, her sword wand is giving her a lot of help, and the magic that she can wield is, holding back several orcs. But when she tries to go toe-to-toe with Grimgor himself, like a 1v1 with Grimgor, yeah, the guy who kicked Archaon in the balls properly beats the shit out of her, and she barely escapes with her army and what's left of it. So, needless to say, it's not going great. It goes without saying that the war isn't exactly going great for anyone who isn't an orc. If you're an orc, then you're having the time of your Zoggin life. That's how the best way to put it. So the the Greenskin War wasn't really a war. It was more of just an ass kicking for months. Grimgor and the orcs were just beating the hell out of everyone. And they were getting closer and closer to the castle. Like, every day, Grimgor and his army were just stomping their way through defenses, through anything that got in their way. So Eclipsa, seeing that her mom clearly bit off more than she can chew, secretly went to go talk to her boyfriend, Globgor. So at this time, yeah, she's mad. She's secretly seeing Globgor, but at the time, the war was going on, and even Globgor reveals, the monsters are also we're getting fragged left and right too, because some of the orc warbands are also just fucking annihilating us left and right. So what happens? What happens next, essentially, is that Eclipse is like, there's something we gotta do, and you're not gonna like it, and my mom's definitely not gonna like it, but if we want to save save Muni from this green tide, then we have to. And he's like, I've already got a standing army. I was hoping I'd see you again. I was hoping you'd say that. So yeah. So Eclipsa goes to her mom, and during this story, Eclipsa stops and goes, here's why the war wasn't really recorded that well. It wasn't because we were getting our asses kicked by the orcs. It's because my mom had to make an alliance with Globgor and the Monster Army. And we couldn't have that. So, yeah, that was Mewmans and monsters fought together for the first time in history to battle Grimgor and his orcs. Wasn't exactly. They were now that they had additional forces. There wasn't really. They were holding the line, but the war was still pretty bad. And even with the monster help, the orcs were just clearly the better force. So eventually, Solaria had to look deep into the spell book. She had to look deep and be like, the only way we get rid of them is if we can just send them back. There's no real way to send them, And then they point, the Magical High Commission also points out, I don't think you understand, you can't just get rid of Grimgor and his men. They're like a fungus. If they're here, they're going to stay here. So this spell, you need to find a right spell to send everything orc back. And here's the thing. She was going to use it's only like a one and done spell. You can only use it for once and specifically. Basically, Solaria was going to use this spell in particular, to send away all monsters to an inferno dimension. But now, seeing how things are so dire, she has to bite the bullet and use it on Grimgor and his army. So they gather together. The Mewmans and monsters unite under one big banner and leave the castle and try to meet Grimgor in the open field. Try to chase, bait him and his army into fighting on open ground. And Grimgor, of course, can't say no to a proper fight. So Grimgor and his men follow the Mewmans and monster army out into an open field where Solaria, with her daughter, cast this massive spell and send the orcs and every little bit of them that had been killed, the few that had been killed, back to the old world. And it's at this moment where Eclipsa stops the story because she's like, "What happened? We won the day. The orcs had been pushed back and sent back to their world. But what happened next? I will never forgive my mother." Because what happened next was the Mewmans immediately turned on the monster and started slaughtering them. It was only because Eclipsa managed to get Globgor and what was left of his army out of there that Globgor managed to survive the attack. So at the end of it all, it was just one big, fuck you. And Solaria then decided, I'm just going to focus on a Mewman empire on Muni. Maybe one day I'll revisit it once we clear out the trash here on this planet. And in plain speak, I've clearly underestimated everyone else in the world, so I need to do some XP grinding before I go out and fight. So yeah, there's the end of this. So that was the end of the story. And Muni's and Star is just like, holy crap, your mom was the worst. And she was like, and Eclipse is like, yeah, I'm glad that bitch is dead. So Eclipse just ends the story right there and is like, I want you to understand that this is you know, my mom can be blamed for like 90% of what's wrong with Muni. But yeah. So there you go. So there you go, guys. That is another Star versus Old World of Warhammer Fantasy story. I want to thank Major Mercury for sending this Patreon request. And like I said, if you guys would like to have a Patreon request done, just hit the link below. Head on over to my Patreon. Hit the 3rd tier. That'll allow you access to do so, as well as check out the other videos on Patreon as well. But other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.